Welcome, everyone. This is Show Me Online Teaching, and our goal is to provide practical ideas for online teaching and learning. So each episode, we have a guest teacher sharing a favorite lesson, and in Writing Project Style, we're going to work to adapt the activities and ideas across subject areas and grade levels. Today, I'm really excited that we have Dan Fournier on with us. I have had the pleasure of working with Dan most recently on our KC Storytellers work with students, and he has just a brilliant way of really pulling stories out of students. And so I'm going to let him introduce himself in just a minute. I also want to recognize that on the call we have some help from Casey Doherty in the Republic School District and Julie Sherman from Marceline, Missouri, and also the Missouri Writing Project Network, and Linda Brock out in Blue Springs. And we have Jeff in Raytown. And so I'm really glad to see everybody here. I'm going to encourage you to keep yourself muted, but use the chat feature as much as possible. You can ask questions, make suggestions, connect with other teachers. And so without more blabbing from me, I'm going to turn it over to Dan.
All right. Thanks a lot, Katie. I appreciate that. Hey, everybody. As Katie was saying, my name is Dan Fournier. I'm an English teacher over at Bishop Miege. I currently teach sophomores and juniors. I've been teaching for 10 years, going on my 10th year this year. A few years before I started at Miege, I taught at a K through 8 and worked with 7th and 8th graders. One thing that I love doing, yet it's also kind of unnerving at the same time, is writing in front of kids. And not only the writing part, but the pre-writing brainstorming part of things as well. I try to think out loud in front of them. And I think that's especially important on my off days when I'm sort of struggling with the writing and the thinking out loud. I think it's good for them to see a teacher struggle. My current fascination has been with this book called Why They Can't Write. And early on, the author, I think John Warner is his name, speaks of this idea that kids should be in charge of every aspect of the writing process. That means everything from what they write about to how they go about putting their ideas together and presenting their ideas. I don't think kids often think of themselves as writers. And part of the reason, I believe, is this lack of ownership that they feel. So the lesson I wanted to walk through today focuses on the early stages of a project that I actually began just a couple of weeks ago that piggybacks with the work that Kelly Gallagher started on his website involving the coronavirus and all that goings on with that. So I guess we'll go ahead and just jump right into the little presentation I put together. Okay, could we go to that first slide? All right, awesome. And so no, that's great. Yeah, if you could go to the next slide. So the project so far, we're about 2 weeks in, and the students have been collecting meaningful reflections about just everyday life in isolation. They can react to the things they're coming across, social media posts or songs or YouTube clips, and they can write creatively about these. They can also stick to traditional reflections if they would like. So we are at the stages where they've been at this for a couple of weeks, and they're starting to select their best ideas that they will eventually turn into polished pieces of writing. So this lesson that we're going to walk through starts at the beginning of that process. So this would be a flashback from 2 weeks ago. Okay, so what I would like everyone to do is to do a quick write. We're gonna write for, we'll say, 4 minutes. After we watch this brief clip, you'll have, yeah, 4 minutes to respond however you would like. Julie, if you could go to the next slide. So usually, especially when kids are at a loss as to how to begin, I'll give them a few ideas of ways they can start. I always make it clear, though, that they can react in any way that they would like. So if they want to watch the clip and write a really quick story, they can. If they're thinking poetry and they want to go about it that way, then that's fine. If they want to do a short descriptive piece or a song, or maybe they think the piece is biased in some way, so they want to present an argument, in any other way in which you would like to respond. So we'll go ahead and walk through this. We'll watch about 2 or 3 minutes of this video. All right.
This week, a seemingly ununited response in these United States.
All the lights are coming on.
As the COVID-19 pandemic continues its assault.
There will be people who die who didn't need to die.
In parts of the country, empty streets and shuttered shops. In others, it seemed, business as usual.
It's really messing up with my spring break.
Tonight, a look at the varied responses and attitudes state to state, town to town, with some left running to play catch up.
I don't think they realize how serious this can be. It's brutal when you get it.
Earlier this week, with projections that the pandemic could stretch into summer, Vanessa Hudgens drawing ire after posting this video online.
It's a virus, I get it, like, I respect it, but at the same time, like, even if everybody gets it, like, yeah, people are gonna die. It's just terrible, but like, inevitable?
The actress later apologized, calling her words insensitive and not appropriate for the situation our country and the world are in right now. And new data released by the CDC showing that it's not just the elderly and vulnerable populations, younger Americans are at risk too. Nearly 40% of American patients hospitalized for the virus were between the ages of 20 and 54. What's unclear is
okay, Julie, if you'd go ahead and stop it right there, that'd be great. All right, we'll take, we'll try 3 minutes, and you'd react in any way you see fit. You can get creative, you can write a reflection, and we'll meet back in about 3 minutes. All right, thanks everyone. If you could take about 1 more minute. Okay, if you could go ahead and finish the sentence that you're on, that would be great. And this would be a good time if anyone feels inclined to share what they wrote in the chat. That might be the best way to do it. So we'll take a few seconds and give everyone a chance to do that. Okay, and while everyone's doing that, I can share briefly how I went about this. I've tried a couple of different ways. A few weeks back, before all of this happened, I was trying out some two-voice poetry in my class, which would take two different perspectives. So I took the younger generation, kind of their perspective versus the older generation, and tried out that dynamic. And I also wrote a poem through the perspective of those kids that were on spring break. So those are just a couple of different ways that I went about it.
I love that you shared that, Daniel. I was thinking about that poem that's so popular, especially I think at middle school, about I forget the title, but it's about what did you do when I wasn't there? Have you read that poem? So it's like the kid talking about, well, did you do anything while we weren't there? And then the rest of the class and their response. So it's kind of a fun take on that.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But I think this could be a really interesting perspective examination by looking at both that, what you saw in the video, right? The contrasting ideas.
Yeah,
Oh,
for sure.
I'm sorry. For me, I was like Casey, I saw that you said you asked a lot of questions. That's what I was at that stage of just generating a lot of questions, wondering what direction I would actually take the writing. And it brought me back to what you said first, Dan, when you said the hard part sometimes about writing in front of kids is the messy generation part, because I don't know what direction I'm going to take this. And being honest in front of kids and saying that is like when I first started doing it, that was very uncomfortable for me. So I totally agree with what you said there.
All right. Yeah, no, it's definitely one of those things where it never stops like being uncomfortable for me. But it really does a lot of good for the community in general, that there really is, it's impossible to do it wrong. So
yeah. Casey, what are you thinking?
Well, I noticed that so many of us on the chat wrote about that dual perspective, and I loved what Jeff said about, what would I write to my 18-year-old self? We can even turn that perspective around for the students and say, what would you write to your 40-year-old self if you saw this happening? Like, I don't know if that's something we could do, but it sounds very interesting to even perhaps try. And Katie even was bringing up, rethinking her own spring break experiences. She mentioned she read an article in the Atlantic just today by Ed Young called Pandemic Summer, which captures some big thoughts on this topic. And I wrote about that as well with regards to what is this going to come back? I mean, back to my questions, as the weather gets warmer, what are we looking at? What are we looking ahead? So those are some of the other comments in our chat box. Daniel, you can go on, you can move on if you want. I don't know what your next step is, but I'd like to hear more.
All right, great. Yeah, I was just going to end out with just a quick little rationale. Looks like we already got an opportunity to share. So as Linda was saying, kind of at the beginning, it can be a little shaky. If I don't give examples or videos, seeds to get them started, sometimes it's a little shaky. So at the very beginning, I curate just a few examples to get everybody going, kind of like we just did. And the idea is that eventually I want them to start picking the things that they want to react to, like picking the clips, picking song lyrics, picking social media posts. But I find that starting with a clip kind of gets them going. I always give them suggestions of various genres, but I really try to make it my main point that there really is no limit to what they can do. So the online part of it, or how I've been doing this, is I'll share my screen, I'll show them the example, kind of like we just walked through, and then we do some whole class writing. The breakout rooms in the Zoom conferences have been really great too. It gives kids, especially those kids that will share a little more freely, if there's only 3 or 4 people around, it gives them a chance to share what they've come up with. Okay. I think there's might be 2 more slides. We'll go ahead and go to the next one. So these are just a few things that I hope this lesson will do, is to give students choices like early on in the process, and empower them to make these moves as a writer, to give them that ownership like really early on, to create small communities of writers to collaborate, and then to allow students. I don't know that there's very many students that would consider themselves writers, and I think that's an important step to the whole thing. And so my hope is that through little activities like this, they start to gain a sense of ownership when it comes to their own identity as a writer. All right, and I'd like to end out with a quote, if you don't mind. This is from Why They Can't Write. It's a book I've been into, in the past few days. To write is to make choices word by word, sentence by sentence, paragraph by paragraph. Writers choose what they want to write about, whom they want to write to, and why they are writing. So hopefully this lesson was one of the, one of the early stages in kids really getting acquainted with the idea that it's wide open, and they can write, to whatever they want to write to. So I don't know if anyone has any questions. I appreciate everybody's attention.
Well, Dan, I just wondered if you have found that it takes a while for students to believe you, to believe that you really do trust them to find what they want to write about and then choose a genre to use, or do you find that they just jump right in?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a few of them do jump right in, but some of them are really used to being told what to do. And I've been guilty of that. I mean, for years I was guilty of that. Basically just feeding them all of the steps and looking at their writing and telling them what they need to fix. So that's a mindset that's, I think it's hard to dash. But if I start doing this from the get-go, I find that a lot more of them, you know, buy into it and continue to believe that they're not going to get punished for making these decisions. So
I'm going to follow up with that because this Jan had posted a question that really kind of leads into that. And she's wondering, are you finding that your students are working consistently? And are some coming forward more often while others hold back? What are you noticing about their writing during this time?
yeah, so one thing I am noticing that I like a lot is I'm getting a lot of questions, which that to me is a good sign. I know that at the end of class, when I do the classic, does anybody have any questions? It's dead silent in the room. And I do a thing now where I force them to ask questions. But I've been getting a lot of questions about the assignment, which is great. Kids sharing their writing with me like way before it's due. And so a lot of them are kind of embracing this whole thing. I do have a few kids that are still kind of confused and wondering, you know, where they should go next. But hopefully, you know, with those kids, I think it's just kind of a step-by-step process.
She also added, are you noticing any of their confidence growing or diminishing in this new setting, in the surrounding?
So I guess I've seen a little bit of both. There's the kids that find all this space a little unsettling, that someone's just telling them to basically explore. So some of them that almost like freezes them in place. But then the kids that really are not afraid to get in there, finding that all the stuff they're reflecting on, they're not getting, that's ungraded. So they're not getting graded down for going about something a certain way. And so as kids get deeper into this, I think I am getting a lot more, you know, confident students, which is great.
And then I know, Jeff, I had a tech question, and maybe you and Jeff both can answer this. I don't know, but are you managing, when you break those kids out into the Zoom rooms, are you managing those rooms on the back end? Like, talk a little bit about the way you've done this online now with that Zoom.
So I can start, and then I guess Jeff can talk about his experience. That's the one thing that's kind of tough, and maybe it's okay because I'm not able to micromanage every aspect of what they're doing. But when they're in that Zoom room, I don't know. I can't tell. You have no idea of what they're doing in there. Sometimes I go into a room and everyone's muted and nobody's sharing, which is kind of a bummer. I do tell them that I do drop in often, and I will. So that kind of keeps them on their toes. But I don't know, Jeff, if you've had any better experiences with that.
Well, we have two very different classrooms because I'm dealing with you're getting 100% attendance and I'm getting about 10% attendance, and so no, I don't have a whole lot of experience with breakout rooms. I don't have enough kids in front of me at the first time to send them out.
I gotcha.
What I was thinking about, though, is kind of related to that, which is I've been trying to mess around with a similar thing, writing in front of the kids and sort of breaking things into pieces. And because I don't have a big audience, I don't have the kid there to ask me the questions or whatever. I started screencastifying those and posting those as videos for kids to look at. So sort of 5-minute here's how I would write the intro of this thing, sort of things, and then talking through my writing, which was a lot more challenging than I thought it was going to be. It's a 5-minute video. It probably took me 40 minutes to get it right and and you know, make sense. But I mean, it's a similar thing. It's just I mean, one of the biggest differences in everything you said is you're getting like 100% attendance, and I know most of the teachers I'm talking to in my district are not getting anywhere near that, and that changes the equation pretty drastically, but it's still a good, I mean, it's still, you just have to adjust for the difference.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, to get them going initially, I recorded a Flipgrid, and it was the same thing. I think it took me like an hour to record a 2-minute video. I was way overthinking it, and you sort of get used to the idea that it doesn't need to be perfect.
Well, that is really what I've been thinking about, Dan, is how much respect you show for your students by being vulnerable with them and treating them like writers. I feel like one of the things I constantly relearn as I work with adult learners is that simple is best. The more complicated I try to make something, I'm always relearning, wait, let them read or write this thing and respond to it. That's where we start. And so I just love that you sort of honor that with your high school students as well.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate that.
If we have time, Casey made a really great point in the chat about silent observers. And she said that she got a teacher got an email from a parent, and the parent noticed the child was not really participating, but is a silent observer. And I think that just like we have in class, that we probably have a lot of silent observers in this, you know, mode as well. So it would be interesting if there was some way to, I don't know, to hear from more of the students, like, are you at least listening, not in a negative way, but in a positive way, like I can support you even though you're not responding online. I like that conversation, Casey.
Well, thanks so much, Dan, and thanks everybody for the conversation. And I hope that all of you can join us again. We'll be here every Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 2 o'clock. So thank you. Take care of yourselves and
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.